Okay, so I've got like two ideas in mind about what to talk about. One is very I don't know, abstract in general, somewhat abstract in general. The other one is it's sort of the opposite, rather concrete in particular. I should stop thinking about whatever Levere means by those things, because he had some big mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have something abstract in general to talk about, something particular to talk about. Now, as it happens, they actually fit together perfectly. That supposedly that the concrete particular stuff is very much an application of the abstract general stuff, and the abstract general stuff is a generalization of the concrete particular stuff. So, that means it should work out perfectly, or ideally it would work out perfectly. But,
right.
But of course, there's always something will go wrong. I won't have to have time to talk about both of them. I guess I'm going to try start with the general and abstract stuff, and then if we're lucky, we'll get to the concrete particular stuff. So the abstract general stuff is kind of following up on things we've been, it's a little bit hard to remember to what extent we were just talking about this in email, or to what extent we were talking about it in the video chats, but we were talking about philosophies of separable objects, and what does that mean? Separable algebras, and what does that mean? And how does that relate to each version of Galois theory and stuff like that? And yeah, so I have a bunch of things to say about that, which includes very much a bunch of questions, some of which we should try to answer, maybe in some cases by looking up the answer or something like that. But that's what the abstract general stuff is supposed to be about. And then the very concrete particular stuff is supposed to be some application of that to the art and reciprocity stuff that I've been trying to understand recently. So that's the rough plan of the outline for today. So let me try to start now. So let me try to recap some of the things that you've been telling me, some of which is coming from this guy Carboni.
Yep.
Who has some paper on, well, it's on this kind of Grothendieck's Galois theory, but is there a name to the paper or something like that? And like Todd has been encouraging us to read this, or encouraging you not to read it, so that
he's been claiming that he will read it.
Yes.
And report
so that
back
you won't
at
have
some
to,
point, but he hasn't. He's going to do that.
Okay.
So that paper has a funny name.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't. Yeah, it's matrices, relations, and group representations.
Right. I remember now that you told me about the sort of what's the word I'm looking for? A deceptive name. Say it again.
Matrices, relations. Oh, you're gonna really brutalize it. Okay, relations
and
group representations.
And group representations. Okay. And yeah, so it's not like I'm going to be actually referring to anything in this yet, but I just want to have this as a reference to fall back on. So one of the things you've been telling me is that, let's say, for K is a sufficiently nice perhaps field or something more general, commutative ring, or something like that. From such a thing, we're going to get, so let's see, from K, which is a sufficiently nice field or commutative ring or something like that, we're going to get something like a Boolean topos. Maybe, I don't know. I vaguely remember somebody saying Boolean pretopos or something like that.
Well, from a field, you get a Boolean topos.
Yeah.
From a mere commutative ring, I don't actually know.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
Carboni generalizes even further, and he gets a Boolean pretopos. So.
All right, but I'm going to be vague about this.
Okay.
We're going to try to get more precise ideas out of this. But to start with, we have the vague idea that we get a Boolean, something like a Boolean topos, perhaps a Boolean pretopos, by taking the separable commutative k-algebras or some generalization of that. And some, in particular, some generalization of this concept of separable or something like that, or perhaps some generalization of that meaning particularly the separable concept. That, when you adapt this idea to something like a commutative ring or a sufficiently nice commutative ring instead of a field, that you may have to come up with some more precise or some more elaborate analog of separable or something here. And in fact, right, I guess maybe from email in particular, we have a kind of guess about that, which is that in certain cases, it might end up being something like etale or something like that.
Yep.
And it might be around that point that, I start getting a whole bunch of terminology and concepts that are vaguely related to this, but in very confusing ways. And they start, it starts creating potential confusion for me. So for example, we're talking about things like toposes here. We're talking about things like etale here. And then there are things, you hear those words, and I start thinking about, I hear people talk about things like etale topos and stuff like that. But that's not exactly the way these words etale and topos are really fitting into the story here yet. It doesn't have that much to do with etale toposes yet, I don't think, but it's a little bit confusing. So that's an example of one of the kinds of traps that I could fall into here, or that I could push both of us here if we're not sufficiently careful.
I get really annoyed. It turns out that there are two French words that sound like etale, which have accents in slightly different accents that are used mathematically in different ways by groups.
Is it possible that I've been, not noticing this all along? That
it's quite. I think it's almost certain you haven't noticed it.
But is there a difference in pronunciation, or is it just in spelling?
There probably is. Yeah, there's an NLab remark about it. Someone corrected me for using one of the etales when I should have used the other. Someone like Toby Bartles, who loves to needle me in pedantic ways like that. But so I think it's possible that etale and the two of the etales that you're talking about just now are like actually different words.
I'm really not sure. I mean, they are related, but again, they just fit into the story in more than one way.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just pointing out how annoying it can be.
Sure. Yeah, there are all sorts of dangers here, but we're gonna not worry too much about all of the dangers. We're gonna search for something we can understand here and try to ignore the stuff that I can't understand. So maybe I should add a little bit of commentary to what I'm saying here about what we're doing, which is, and the commentary is something like that. Well, maybe I should just say that, this is related to Grothendieck's perspective on Galois theory. Sort of. So well, and one of the things I've been mulling over is how to try to connect this alleged perspective to some other perspective or perspectives that I've been trying to develop for my own understanding, based on certain versions of what I sometimes call a Tanakian philosophy. And these are all very much connected. There's no question that these really are connected, but they can be connected in confusing ways, and you have to struggle a little bit sometimes to clarify how it's all connected. So, like, for example, one of the kinds of issues that you have to deal with here sometimes is that in some of the perspectives you tend to be focusing on actions of groups on sets, whereas in some other perspectives, you're focusing more on actions of groups on vector spaces or something like that. Yeah. And there's all sorts of interplay between these viewpoints. So, we may run into something like that here. And in fact, so what am I trying to say here? So let me make some stupid conjectures here. Again, some of this we may have already said in email, but people who haven't been reading the email might not be. Where's my cursor? What is it doing? Oh, sorry, I'm just having my usual stupid cursor problem. Okay. All right, so here's my sort of conjecture. My sort of conjecture is that this idea of a separable commutative algebra is really just I'll put a question mark because I'm not sure how accurate this conjecture is, but separable commutative algebra is basically an obfuscated version of the concept of perhaps set or perhaps finite set or something like that. And so what do I mean by that? It's not just a random insult. I'm actually trying to say something here. So what I'm trying to say is that if K is a commutative ring. And we could try to say this much more generally, perhaps, that we can, instead of starting with a commutative ring, we could start with a theory, or what we sometimes call a two rig, a sort of categorified commutative ring, a total two rig. But for the moment, I'll start with just a commutative ring, and from that we get a total two rig by taking the modules of this, so the k modules, modules of this commutative ring. And once you have that two rig, you can apply the Tanakian philosophy, which is this particular version of the Tanakian philosophy that I often adopt, which says to think in this doctrine of total two rigs, and try to think of models of theories over the universe provided by the k modules. So that just means an interpretation, right? A universe is really just another name for a theory, but more when it's in the mood to be the codomain of an interpretation rather than to be the domain of interpretation. So, you have models of theories over a commutative ring by taking an interpretation of theories from the domain theory to the theory formed by the modules, by the k modules. And that theory formed by the k modules, just trying to remind us of, huge ideas about how the philosophy of this works. That if you think about what the k modules is, as what it is the theory of, it's the theory of a homomorphism from k, which kind of fits in with the whole philosophy that says that a point of the spectrum of k is a homomorphism from k. So
let's see if I can understand that. So what doctrine are you working in here? Is it like
working in the doctrine of total two rigs, basically?
So sometimes your total two rigs are like
representation categories for sometimes.
Well, sometimes that concept is defined over a field or a commutative ring or something, that is, you're working enriched in some particular manner. Whereas now, since you're working with any old commutative ring, so is there still like another commutative ring lurking in the background that's, can you say what you mean by a total two rig super precisely now?
Yes, it's, well,
for this.
Yes. I mean, or I can say it super precisely enough that I may have to admit where I'm being imprecise. That it's a symmetric monoidal total category. And that's sort of good enough. Or sometimes for technical reasons, it's better to say symmetric monoidal locally presentable category.
Okay, but there's no enrichment.
There's no necessary enrichment, but very often we do relativize.
Yeah, I know, but often you do. But like right now, because I was worried that if that doctrine was enriched in some way that depended on a ring, that then now you'd be bringing in a second ring here. But which maybe you could do, but it would get me confused. So okay, but you don't have to do it. So we can just be
Yeah, but I mean, very, very often we do it. Instead of having k be a commutative ring, we might have k being a commutative k0 algebra, and then everything is enriched over k0.
And then in that case, then what is what is a model?
Yes.
Of the theory of K modules.
Right. In that case, it is a it is a homomorphism from. Sorry, we have these two commutative rings, and which one is named which? K and.
So you had K0 being the one that was
K0. Okay, that's good. Yeah, K0 is the background one.
Right.
And yeah. Okay. So so it's a homomorphism from K. And that means that, in this case, because, the background one is the one that you're humming into. You don't even mention it because, it's just kind of taken for granted kind of. So it's a homomorphism from K. And that's right. And that's like a point of the spectrum.
But it's but it's a homomorphism from K to K0 in that particular case. Is that what you
say that once again?
It's a homomorphism from K to K0, right? Is that
yes. Yeah, okay. That's right. And again, there very well may be no such homomorphisms. And nevertheless, the theory may be very rich and interesting. So for example, K0 could be the reals and K could be the complex numbers. And there are no homomorphisms from the complexes back to the reals. But that doesn't mean the theory is trivial. Because the theory can have models not just over the base theory, but it can have models over, all sorts of other universes, including over itself. Every theory has its identity interpretation.
Yeah.
So okay. So I'm right. But I'm trying to explain this idea that we should be able to settle this conjecture. To what extent, or to great extent, we should be able to settle the conjecture that a separable commutative algebra, it's really just an obfuscated way of saying that you have a set, or perhaps just a finite set, or something like that. We need to work out some of those details. So what I mean is that by virtue of the fact that K as a commutative ring has its category of K modules, we can already talk about a finite set over K. When I say finite, maybe I should, nail it down, that it actually has a specific finite cardinality. So for a moment, I'll say, a set of size n, where n is some particular finite cardinality. Okay, so so what I mean by that is that we have right, let me say n is a finite cardinality. And given that n, we have the group n bang, and we can take representations of n bang, and let's do this version where we have a K0 that's lurking in the background, and let's have so we mean representations over K0 modules. And in fact, if you really want to make it specific, make K0, let's say, be the rationals. Okay, that's a good example to use for us. So in this case, it would be representations of n bang over rational vector spaces. Okay. Sorry, now I'm just trying to remember some factoid that you taught me about this, which is that these groups n bang do split over the rationals. Is that right?
Yeah.
In some sense.
Yeah.
So, whereas a lot of other groups don't split over the rationals, but these groups n bang are rather fortunate in that they do. So So all you have to do is interpret this theory into the K modules, and that gives us automatically a concept of n element set over K.
One thing that confuses me is that sometimes what you care a lot about are torsors of a group, but the torsors of n-bang aren't n element sets, they're n factorial element sets. Sure, you want to somehow make
they're both. You can look at them either way. You can look at a torsor in the torsor picture, but you can also look at a torsor in, given any faithful action of the group, let's say A, you can look at the A picture of the torsor. And that's just, like this, it's like the substitution of fibers or whatever. It's the associated, the associated bundle philosophy. So right, in other words, what we're saying is that the torsor is this whole functor, but evaluating this functor at particular special representations give us particular concrete ways of looking at this torsor, at this, the abstract torsor is the functor, but there are specific concrete ways of looking at it by evaluating this functor at some specific representation of n-bang. And particularly if you pick a faithful representation of n-bang, then you will be getting a single concrete manifestation of the torsor, which kind of has everything right there because the action is faithful. So I guess I'm thinking of right. I am thinking of various specific representations of n-bang in this case, and so for example, there's the Cayley representation,
right?
And the associated vector bundle to that is the one that you were talking about.
Well, it's one of the two I was talking about. Yeah. That's
right, but I thought you were pointing out that that's sort of primary in some way. I mean, there's some other philosophy by I guess the other one is primary or something like that. But the other one relies on having this very particular favorite representation that we call the tautological representation of n-bang.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess I usually think of the tautological representation as being a representation acting on a set, but here we're just, we can just turn sets into vector spaces by having the set be the basis of the vector space, taking the free vector space on the set. So you can take the tautological representation, and right, and so one of, and again, I'm sort of assuming or hoping that one of the reasons you brought this up is because which of these representations you use is relevant to the question of, what's the thing that ends up being called the separable algebra. And so it seems like, right, we're guessing that the one that's going to be the separable commutative algebra is the one that you get by evaluating the abstract torsor functor at the tautological representation.
Yes, okay, good. That's what I was hoping.
And I mean, I'm sure the other one is interesting too, but yeah. So
let me just say something to make sure I'm getting it right. So for example, suppose K was the ring of continuous real valued functions on some nice topological space.
How about my favorite one, the circle?
Okay, well, yes, or well, I want to leave it open, but yes, for example.
Okay.
So is it true that then this kind of functor, that big long purple arrow there, would be giving such a thing would be equivalent to giving a covering space of that space by like an n-fold covering of that space.
Yes, I think so. I mean, there are various minor technicalities here that I'm not sure how much I want to worry about. But I mean, for example, if we were doing that way, I would probably want to work with the real field of real numbers as K0, just to make things easier.
Right.
And
yeah,
and then I think it would probably work, but there would be the issue. It's right. There's the sort of issues of to what extent is ordinary point set topology a special case of algebraic geometry, right? You get I'm thinking of like those Gelfand somebody or something like that type theorems that kind of say that you can recover a topological space as the spectrum of a C-star algebra or something like that, commutative C-star algebra or something like that. Right? I mean, that family of theorems is dealing with, in some sense, you could think of it as dealing with the question of, to what extent can you construe topology as a special case of algebraic geometry? To what extent you construe topological spaces as really just being spectrums of certain special kinds of commutative rings, and is the specialness of those commutative rings a property or a structure or whatever, etc. So I'm being vague about this, but yeah, I think it should work the way you're saying, and it not just it should work. It should be interesting and fun to look at that. But I admit that I'm behind schedule on fully thinking out that kind of example, because it seems like there's a certain amount of work involved in in these slightly technical issues that I'm bringing up here that I probably don't want to worry about too much at the moment. There are really good reasons to think about it.
Okay, okay, that's one thing. So I mean, you're right that you could also try to take the same basic idea, but then
I mean, a real good reason for you bringing up this question, though, is because I keep on, every time I talk about the associated vector bundle philosophy, I'm appealing to this idea that you're bringing up here. So yeah, so it's a great question to bring up, and yes, it probably does fit in, but
I mean, you could also try to get away from the get away from the analysis, because, for example, the topological spaces that it works for would be like the compact Hausdorff spaces and blah blah blah. And so you could try to move more over into the realm of algebraic geometry, but then one of the things that yeah, there's all these subtleties. Go ahead. Is that, well, I guess so. Anyway, so there'd be like a whole bunch of, you could try to do it for affine schemes. So you could try to do it in an algebraic way, just using some like finitely presented commutative rings. But then there's also this thing that we're always bumping into, which is like you could try to do it for where your space is like a projective variety, and then you have this field of functions over it, but then you run into these other annoying issues about how.
Yeah, by the way, you brought up these C-star, well, we both brought up these C-star algebras, but there's another flavor in there also, which is the Banach algebras, and they're even more fun, and they have to do with complex analysis as a sort of funny special case of algebraic geometry. And then there's funny interplays there between those Banach algebras and those C-star algebras, because the C-star algebras sometimes act like the boundaries of the boundaries of the spectrums of the Banach algebras. Sorry,
Okay.
sorry. I was just throwing in some extra fun random stuff there, which probably means I wasn't doing a great job of listening to what you were really trying to tell me. But was this, did I miss anything important yet? I probably did. Go ahead,
I was basically saying that you were probably more thinking about more algebraic geometrical examples rather than
yes, that's right. I'm trying to get a lot of intuitive inspiration from the, bundle, topological bundle pictures. But, then it turns out that the philosophy seems, way more beautiful when you approach it in a abstract algebraic geometry way.
I would just be very happy to at some point get the actual topology examples.
Sure.
Because they are sort of the motivating examples in terms of like drawing pictures of stuff.
Yes, yes, absolutely. There's a lot of interesting stuff to pursue there, but I'm not focusing in that direction.
Yep. Okay, so go on. I just wanted to check.
Okay. So yeah, there's like a conjecture here that we should be trying to check some of the details of. So let's see. So again, possibly from the Carboni article or something like that, you gave me some, or possibly not from the Carboni article, but you gave me some definition of separable commutative algebra in some generality, and it had something to do with this abstract algebraic concept of a Frobenius algebra or something like that.
Yep.
And well, so I think you've already alluded to the fact, we've sort of both already somewhat alluded to the fact that that this notion of separable is perhaps, starts out being the appropriate version of a concept when you're working over a field. But then you have to think about possibly how to generalize that, adapt it to some greater generality if you're going to try to work over a commutative ring or something like that.
Yep.
And that we well, so right. So you gave me some definition of separable, which when you looked at the definition of separable, it mentioned something about Frobenius algebras. So we may have to think about that, but I'm not jumping into that just right away, because I just want to comment on the fact that when we then looked at the definitions, or when you showed me the corresponding definition of etale algebra or something like that, etale commutative algebra or something like that, it started out just like the definition of separable.
Yeah.
And so it said something about Frobenius algebras, and then it added some extra stuff. And the extra stuff that it added sounded to me slightly annoying, because it had to, right, it was something about flatness as a module or something like that. And the thing, so let me think about that for a second. So should flatness, right, I think flatness of a module might in fact be the kind of thing that does annoy me somewhat, which might mean that I'm on the wrong track or something here, but let me say why it annoys me. Because so flatness of a module is supposed to be something like you've got a module, and just by having a module, you can tensor modules of a commutative ring. Yeah, you can tensor modules of a commutative ring by other modules of a commutative ring. I think that's what we want to. I mean, there's often other kinds of tensoring involved, but I think we're talking about tensoring modules of a commutative ring by other modules of the same commutative ring. And you can ask about sort of exactness properties of that tensoring functor. And
thanks, Val.
so maybe it's something like well, let's see, I guess it's like, you know, you expect kind of as a birthright, you're expecting to be able to have tensoring with something preserve all colimits. But it's extra privilege if it preserves some kind of limits. And maybe that's what flatness of a module is about.
Yeah, you can say finite limits if you want. I think
but yes. But that's what's annoying me, because those finite limits are not in the doctrine that I'm trying to work.
Yeah.
So that's hinting to me that it could be hinting to me that I'm doing something wrong, or it could be hinting to me that I should try to rephrase my definitions in some different way that doesn't mention the finite limits somehow. And I think when you were sending the email about this, I mean, right, you were sort of apologetically at some point saying, you know, expecting my eyes to glaze over because, like, right, I think it was right around the point when you started mentioning Noetherian versus non-Noetherian rings or something like that. And there were certain things that relied on assumptions of Noetherianness or something like that.
Yeah, you can eliminate some of the jargon in the definition of etale if you're working over a Noetherian ring, but that, of course, is its own jargon.
Right. But
for, I mean, of course, for algebraic geometers, that would count as like a pretty bland assumption. So they say,
well,
there's like on Math Overflow, there's this annoying exchange where someone asked about this exact question, like what's the real definition of etale, and someone said, oh, it's blah blah blah, and then they said, no, you left out this condition, and then the person said, but that's automatic if you have a Noetherian ring. So
right. I'm sort of very sympathetic to the guy who's saying, you know, let's not bother with that pathological stuff. But of course, I presumably have a somewhat different concept of what is pathological compared to that person. But there's, you know, probably some big overlap under which I would probably agree with that person, you know.
Yeah. I think it's some stupid thing like this. Let's see, I'll probably get it wrong. You probably don't even want to know, but
right. Well, not too much, but go ahead. I am encouraging us to not worry too much about those pathological things. Let's try to get them, you know, the main thing right, and then later we can worry about the pathological things. But right now, I want to hear what you say about this. Go ahead.
Well, hold on a second.
Okay.
So yeah, where this new Noetherianness comes in, is that then you can define, in that case, when your ring is Noetherian, you can define etale in this other way, which might be nicer, which is that it's finitely generated, projective, and separable. So you don't have to say, well, so the one question is,
all right, but even still, I still don't really know, you know, how this is going to compare to the definition.
Some of that stuff like that finitely generated has to do with whether we're aiming for obfuscated version of set or finite set.
That's
they are definitely aiming for an obfuscated version of finite set. I mean, that's what they're trying to do, regardless of whether
they being like Carboni and company, or
no, they being like algebraic geometers, etc. So
okay.
So anyway, there is some Yeah, so that's like a source of wiggle room. You could like try to pick whichever one turns out to work out best.
Sure. Right. Right. And so the general philosophy that I'm taking is, I'm not going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my definition on the basis of what I think is the prettiest definition. I'm not going to choose my definition on the basis of trying to get it to agree with their other definitions, but I'm going to choose what I think is the prettiest definition. And then as an afterthought, we're going to try to find out, when does our definition agree with other people's definitions? So at least that's my rough philosophy. But at some point soon, we are going to have to start thinking concretely about what in hell is a Frobenius algebra and why would anybody be interested in that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is reminding me of things that you've been mentioning to me. I think you've been mentioning to me. I could have misheard some of the things you said, but it sounded like you were saying, describing subtleties that I didn't quite catch, but things like, in some cases we're going to have we're going to be dealing with things like the property of being a Frobenius, or the property of carrying a Frobenius algebra structure. In other cases, we actually deal with the structure of being a Frobenius algebra. And so there are, funny interplays between property and structure or things like that. And so I have vague ideas about how that may enter into this story. So, so first of all, I've come close to giving a definition here of, my version of what a finite set over a commutative ring is, a set of size n over a commutative ring. But let me try to make that a little bit more precise. So, although from what I wrote on this tablet, it's already pretty close there because, okay, so it is pretty precise what we mean by the representations of n-bang, again, over the rational field. That's a pretty precise category and pretty precise total 2-rig. We know what the tensor product is. And similarly, K modules, that's a very well-defined theory in this doctrine. And and then and just ask for an interpretation there. And
then, sorry to keep harping on this, but
yes.
Then you're in this case, you were sort of like hinting you meant representations over the rationals. And
yes.
You also simultaneously thinking of K as being a commutative algebra over the rationals. Is that how you do it? You just sort of like put the rationals into everything.
I think that's what I'm doing at this point.
Okay, good. I mean, I would like that. That would just be sort of then it's just sort of like an omnipresent background assumption in this.
That's right. I think we're saying K0 is equal to the rationals.
Yep. I mean, even more than that, I'm just want to make sure it's like K is over K0 from the start.
Yes. That's right. Okay,
doke. Sounds so. Okay, let's see. So this is a differently obfuscated version of a set.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. This is a differently obfuscated version. That's right.
I was just laughing because I realized that most people would consider this pretty obfuscated.
Well, but they would also probably at gunpoint admit that their version is kind of obfuscated too. I don't know. But let me try to give the rant that says that this is not obfuscated. So the rant that says this is not obfuscated is that this theory over on the left, that is the theory of a set of size n. Morally, which means that all we're doing here is saying that we're saying that a set of size n is a model of the theory of a set of size n. So it's a purely tautological thing. That's what's supposed to be good. And sort of non-obfuscatory about this, but that it's very tautological in a way.
Yeah. So what's obfuscatory?
Tautologicalness.
Yeah. So I mean, in a way, you could blame the obfuscation on you want to say a set of some finite size, and you want to say it in a way that doesn't mention n at all. And
Yeah,
n at all, and then you're led to this concept of separable algebra, apparently.
well, yeah. I mean, that's a very interesting question. I mean, right at this point, I'm buying some simplicity by fixing the cardinality n. But when we try to, regain the flexibility of not having to specify the number n, then that raises a whole bunch of questions. I mean, you're kind of perhaps hinting at some particular way of handling that, but I think we should keep an open mind about how that may end up coming in here. So, but okay, but right. So I'm sort of defining. Tentatively, I'm defining a set of size n over k to be a model like this, and an interpretation of theories like this, and in particular, if we evaluate this abstract Torsor functor, if we evaluate it at the tautological representation, then that should give us the thing which is actually allegedly going to become this separable algebra. That's going to become this separable algebra. And in particular, there's going to be a certain amount of work involved in making that into a separable algebra, right? Because it's just starting out as a module. So we're going to have to think about how to make it into an algebra, or possibly a co-algebra, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there should be some interesting stories there about how this happens. And perhaps another thing is, we should also think of, at this point, we should still really think of this as conjectural. I mean, right? In a way, we can always be very weaselly, and we can say that, that we can say that this isn't conjectural because, we know it's true in at least one case, and we're just interested in finding out, what is the full generality of where it is true that this is equivalent to. But we're sort of hoping that it's not just in some trivial case that it's going to be equivalent to this. So, but we're keeping an open mind about it. So we really should think of this as conjectural in the sense that it could get refuted to some extent. I mean, the worst that it could get refuted is that you find out that the range in which it's true is rather small. But sorry, just having cursor problems here. But there's still a lot of suspense here for me. Are we on the right track here, or is this going to be, is this going to work in such a limited range of things that we should actually consider it to be false and find a better conjecture? So yeah. So okay. So that's how this conjecture goes, and we're trying to find out how, does this have any similarity to this Frobenius algebra definition of separability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're going to try now. Are we going to say anything else right now?
I'll hold my fire.
Okay. So maybe at this point, we actually should try to write down what somebody claims. Maybe you claimed, I can blame you for this, in email, you claimed what the definition of separable commutative algebra is here.
Okay.
So is it possible you can find this quicker than I can? You can look at your email that you sent to me.
No, that at least I know. I've been thinking about these things for a long time.
Okay, so what does that say?
Okay.
So this is perhaps over a field to begin with?
That's good, yeah. Yep.
Okay, and then a separable commutative k-algebra? is by definition what?
So it's a commutative k-algebra that for which that admits that you can equip it with the structure of a Frobenius algebra with a certain property.
Is there a name for that? Is that a special Frobenius
Yeah,
algebra?
a special Frobenius algebra, yeah.
Exists a special Frobenius algebra structure. Okay, this commutative k-algebra, is it okay to call it A, or is there some better letter to use here?
That's great.
Okay, such that there exists this special Frobenius algebra structure on A, and that's it?
That's it.
Of course, we have to find out what a special Frobenius algebra structure is, et cetera, et cetera. But right, this is the definition I was looking for that you mentioned in email. Now, and we've already been hinting about how when we generalize K to more general than a field, the commutative ring that's more general than a field, then we may adapt this notion of separable to something more involved, perhaps etale or something like that. And
just not that you
yes.
necessarily care, but
Yes.
But this definition is the definition of separable k-algebra over any commutative ring. So I mean this, if you, so when
Yes.
people, yeah, so the tweaking is that they may add extra adjectives on besides separable to get the kind of algebras that they want, but they don't change the definition of separable algebra.
Right, right. It's good that you mentioned that because I wasn't really making that clear. Maybe that means that, you know, maybe what I really should have done was say that this is the definition of etale over a field or something like that. And then
you want to cause trouble. Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, that's
or something. I don't know.
It is equivalent to etale over a field. Yes. But this is the definition of separable. Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. But now, okay. So let me mention something here, which is a vague idea. This is let me mention as a digression on the side, a vague idea here, which is that some of the big pictures that you've been idly telling me about have to do with unifying stories involving separable commutative algebras with other stories involving separable central algebras.
Yep.
And so to me, that raises the question of how that project of trying to unify those stories together, how that relates to this issue of how, you know, the more complete substitute for separability may be etale or something like that. In other words, let me put it in a joking way. You know, we know what a commutative etale algebra is, or we think we do, or we think we should know what a commutative etale algebra is, or an etale commutative algebra. And the joke is, well, maybe we should also find out at some point what a central etale algebra is, or an etale central algebra is, right? I mean, if we're going to fix up the concept of separability so that it's this more elaborate concept of etale, if we're going to do that when we're working in the commutative case, well, then maybe we should do something like that in the central case too. I mean, maybe that's.
So I mean,
yeah. I
mean, there is a name for the fixed concept of central separable algebra.
Yeah.
Does it even need to be fixed? Maybe it doesn't need to be fixed, but there is another name for it regardless. It's called Azumaya algebra. Or that is I mean, I guess you could argue about what's the true fixing, but that is a beautiful concept.
That's true. That is a beautiful concept, the way, because it's very abstract. All right, let me just write a little note to myself about that. So the idea is that maybe Azumaya is equal to this sort of joking concept of central etale that I was imagining. I mean, I guess I should have thought about that, because I have thought about how Azumaya is a good generalization. Well, anyway, this is a digression off to the side for me to think about later. All right. But now we're trying to focus on this definition of separable perhaps over any commutative ring, but in particular over a field. So I'm sort of thinking about that out loud about this at the moment. Well, so right, maybe you should let me ramble on a little bit before you interrupt too much, because if you interrupt too much, then I won't get the chance to say some of the really stupid things that I want to say. So I'm imagining that there's some abstract concept of Frobenius algebra or Frobenius monoid or something like that, that might be defined by like a prop or something like that. Might be, or might even defined by an operand, but maybe it's not defined by an operand. Maybe it's defined by a prop. Maybe I should ask you about this.
It's defined by a prop, yeah, not an operand.
Defined by a prop. And this, and we don't need to think of this prop as being enriched over vector space. We can just think of this as being a set enriched. You know, it's an unenriched prop.
Yep.
And it really is a prop. It's not a pro. So it really is a, or it's not like a prob. It's not like a braided pro. It's really, well, okay, maybe there are all sorts of subtle generalizations.
No, actually, it is just a pro. You don't need the.
It's just a pro?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, there's no.
What about the special concept? Is that going to be a pro or a pro?
Still just pro. There's no commuted. There's no switching of strands in any of those concepts. Yeah.
I'm suspicious about this. So, but I'm
really. When you get to commutative Frobenius algebras, then of course you need them. That's a prop, which is what we've been talking about. But okay, but right. Things like that could easily come in. But let me think. So, well, okay. So whether you're defining a pro or a prop or whatever, you could. I mean, one way to define a pro or a prop, for example, is to, you know, just sort of, I was going to say sketch it out, but, you know, maybe you use some other terminology, like give a presentation, or, you know, is there another name we should use for that? I mean, it's just like an axiomatization, like, whereas, and this can be contrasted to, you know, some other cases where you might, for example, you give a prop by some other means where you like, you know, manifestly say what each operation space is. Mm-hmm. For each given arity, given co-arity, you have a set. Since we're working with set enriched props at the moment, you have a set of the operations of that arity and that co-arity. And, you know, if you have a sketched or presented prop, then you may have a very explicit idea of what the algebras are, but you may be uncertain, or it's too annoying to figure out what the
what these operation spaces are. Whereas in some other cases, the operation spaces themselves are nice and easy to describe. So I guess one of the things I'm saying here is I'm imagining a particular prop that has rather easy to describe operation spaces. And I'll tell you what this prop is, and then maybe you can tell me if there's a name for this prop. Okay?
Yeah.
So I think I want to say something like, first of all, is there some kind of duality for props? Is there the dual of a prop where you just exchange arity and co-arity? Am I being confused here or something like that?
That's true. I think that's true.
Okay, then that may give me a better chance of guessing correctly on the first guess, if you allow me this freedom to get that backward. So I'm just imagining something like, is this what I want? I want something like the operation space just to be the exponential. Does that make any sense? What am I trying to say? How about that? Is that some famous?
So what does that mean? 2 to the S?
No, I'm saying something like arity to the power of co-arity, or vice versa, or something like that.
Relations. Wait, what is that?
Well, right, I'm saying functions, but another good possibility here would be relations or something like that, or correlations. Correlations.
So I happen to be in luck that I have students who figured out the prop for special Frobenius algebras.
Does special somehow automatically imply commutative or
no.
that's an orthogonal thing?
Wait a minute, let's see. Sorry, they figured out the prop for special commutative Frobenius algebras.
Okay.
Which is different than special.
Yes.
And what that was, the operation spaces were correlations.
Correlations. I think we discussed this like a few decades ago.
Yeah, I was really
what?
Yeah, I was really excited about that at some point, and I still like it.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Steve Lack who had figured out prop for Frobenius, commutative Frobenius algebras without the special
Frobenius algebras.
And that was
again, this is, as soon as we start discussing this stuff, this reminds me of that book that I've never completely read or understood, which by Joachim, how do you pronounce his name? Joachim Koch?
Yep. Well, he definitely talks about
stuff vaguely like this. Different kinds of Frobenius algebras or something? I don't know.
Yeah, so there's that description, which is the prop for commutative Frobenius algebras.
Yeah.
Is also the category of two-dimensional cobordisms, two-dimensional oriented cobordisms.
Right. Well, the moment we said correlations, we were already hinting that they were really cobordisms. I mean, right? I mean, these correlations that we're talking about are some very degenerate kind of cobordisms. Is that right?
You can think of those as like cobordisms where you're allowed.
Or perhaps they're, more something abstract. I mean, there's some sort of, right? I mean, there's co-spans and correlations and cobordisms. These are all somehow related. Sorry, am I interrupting too much here? Were the things you
Well, you are if you want to hear the answers.
Well, go ahead. Try to
know facts or whether you want to talk. So
go ahead. Try to say something.
So okay. Well, the one I was gonna say, let's see if I get this right. So
and you were attributing some of this to Steve Lack?
Yeah, Steve Lack.
Okay.
I believe showed that. I hope I get this right. prop for commutative Frobenius algebras is the category of cospans of finite sets. I hope I got that right. I'm worrying about whether I got that right. I don't know if that's right.
But while you're doing this and trying to get it right, I want to try to write some of this down. So maybe I'm trying to make a little chart or table of some props here.
Yeah.
Some relevant props, some quasi-relevant props in this discussion. And so one of them is a prop for commutative special or special commutative. Is there some strong preference for saying commutative before special or special before commutative? You don't care.
No, I don't care. Let me just share can I share my screen? I'll just show you.
Yes. So yeah, you can just steal my screen sharing, or I can turn it off or something like that. Yeah.
So
but meanwhile, I'm trying for my own notes. I'm trying to write some stuff down here.
Yeah. So.
Oh, so it's okay. Now it sounds like you've already got the table that I was about to write in my own notes.
Yeah, no, I had screwed it up in a number of ways.
Sure, but that's okay.
So there's this nice little chart here.
Oh, so you're saying that this is actually written by Steve Lack?
Well, this chart is not by him. This chart is by me, but Steve Lack.
Oh, it's not by you. Okay.
Proved some of these.
Okay, but on the other hand, this little table that you wrote there, which is a lot like the table I was about to try to write down, except that I was expecting to maybe write a larger table or something like that. Well, except that I was also expecting to write, let me think. Well, I'm sorry. Your scheme of organization, I guess, is a little bit different from what I was going to use. But okay, so you've got like a horizontal dimension here and a vertical dimension, but then you've got like this third dimension, which is sort of syntax versus semantics or something like that. So like, right, in your picture, it says spans, and beneath that, it says extra bicommutative bimonoids. And I'm sort of thinking of spans as what I would call syntactic, and extra bicommutative bimonoid as being what I would call semantic. I mean, not everybody would agree with that distinction, but that's the way I'm interpreting your chart here.
Yeah, so the thing that I was completely forgetting about is besides this.
But it really sounds like, right. Remember, we used to talk about the genus killer, and it sounds like
so that's the special. That's the special. And then there's this other thing called the extra law. That's our own invention. Which is,
extra. I don't think I know anything about that.
Yeah, I know. It's very irritating. But the extra law says that the unit followed by the co-unit is the identity. So that's the.
Wait a minute. I'm confused here. I'm confused here. Because I see 3. I wasn't expecting extra to show up in 3 out of the 4.
Well, the extra law holds for any bimonoid, so we're just sticking it in there.
I mean, have you got a? Huh? Well, then why didn't you put it in the upper right corner? Why doesn't it say extra special?
It's not true. It's not true for Frobenius monoids. So the extra law says that if.
Okay, but it is true for the extra special. Can you go back to the chart?
Yeah, well, I just want to show you. This is read horizontally. This is the extra law. So it's followed by death is might as well not have. The unit followed by the co-unit is equal to the identity on. So that's the extra law. And so that law holds in any bimonoid.
I'm not quite grokking this yet. I mean, maybe just having a mental block or something like that. Well, I think what it is you're drawing. you have this style of drawing diagrams never gotten completely comfortable with. So, or maybe it's just that I don't know what the input and the output is, or something like that.
Well, the input's on the left. These are horizontal, so the input's on one side and the output's on the other side. It doesn't matter.
Okay, so this is time is sort of going from left to right or something like that.
Yeah.
Or I can start thinking. Okay, so boy, is this something dual to genus killer? Let's see.
This is yeah. So there, and this is the special law. This is the one you're calling the genus killer here.
I may have to go home and think about all of these again, partially because I'm not.
Well, I obviously
not a diagrammatic person in the same sense that you're a diagrammatic person. So I probably, I may have to think about how to translate these into my language. But what were you going to say?
Yeah, well, anyway, I was just going to say I'd forgotten a lot of this stuff, but I was really into it at one point. But
okay, but you still see what's bugging me about this. So you're still saying that upper left we should not have extra.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Sorry. I said that wrong. Upper right we should not have extra, and we don't.
Right. If you added
but
extra,
now you're saying that in lower right you should have extra. Why?
No, you could. No, sorry, upper left.
Lower right.
Yeah, definitely. That's the difference between cospans and correlations, is that there are, in a cospan of finite sets, if you have extra points in the apex of the cospan that are not hit by either the feet, they do affect the cospan. I mean, their existence is relevant. But if you just think of the cospan as giving you a correlation, those extra points in the middle there don't affect the correlation.
I'm really it's gonna take me some
okay
to think all these over and but okay, so I didn't even notice that. Okay, so in your right-hand column has co stuff and your left-hand column has not the co. And boy, sorry, just another stupid question. So all of these things that you're drawing here are things which very much repay eventual categorification. Instead of having bimonoids, have them be, or instead of having them be monoids, have them be monoidals or something like that.
Right.
And that gets you into higher spans and things like that. So I'm just wondering if you've thought about that. It's a very stupid, because I don't know exactly how that's going to go, but I mean, it looks like
not really much. No, not so much.
Okay, but I have a feeling that should.
Yeah. Well, anyway, should I make
See,
this
one of the things that happens is with the higher spans is that Cartesianness shows up in a very natural way. Sorry. This I wasn't expecting you to show me this stuff. So you're showing me this stuff, and there's a whole bunch of digressive fun things to say about it, which I shouldn't really be saying. But okay, but this is very helpful. This is very helpful, even if I'm being a little bit too digressive, because this really is still pointing in a lot of directions that we want to go in here. But this is still, even if it's getting a little bit too much fun, it's still on the track of the specific precise conjectures that we want to try to test. Specific, relatively precise conjectures that we want to check. So, all right. So, okay. So let me try not to drink in all of these examples that you're talking about here, but maybe I can just focus in on one that we really want. So Bicommutative.
So I think the ones that we were talking about were the commutative Frobenius algebras. And maybe
this is also reminding me of allegories versus toposes, but go ahead. Yes, what do you think?
The ones we were talking about were the special commutative Frobenius algebras, which are these. And also just like maybe dropping the specialness. I don't know. But the most important one are these. That is, these are the ones that are connected to separable algebras. And I was screwing up various other things I was saying, but this is the true story here.
Okay, but so in particular, it sounds like one of the things that you might have to do to get this to work is that, we might mean something like, with correlations, you just literally take correlations, but with cospans, you might have to say something like isomorphism classes of
of
cospans or something like
yes,
that.
definitely. Yes.
Okay. All right. So
Do I stop this thing?
Say it again.
Should I turn this off?
I guess not quite yet.
Okay.
Just leave it there for a second. And also, I'm just kind of planning out, how much further we should go. Maybe we should aim to quit by my noontime or something. I mean, we started.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, let's aim for that. So, but that still gives me, 15 minutes to ask some questions here. And I have a vague idea in my mind of these questions that I want to ask, which is, again, all aimed at trying to understand to what extent this concept of separable commutative algebra over a field, to what extent it is going to agree with my proposed definition of what a size n set over a commutative ring should be. Well, so let me say, I mean, have I already said this out loud yet? I might have. It's sort of almost obvious, I think, but it's almost obvious, but it also doesn't make that much sense yet. But what I'm trying to say is that there is some sort of funny potential harmony between the syntax and the semantics here. That, I keep on saying that the semantics that I'm aiming for here is something like, and boy, I mean, there's a whole bunch of duality and deliberate game playing duality between syntax and semantics here. So, I mean, it's, let's not be too much surprised by something that's by that kind of theme showing up here. I should probably say more about that later. But more specifically, what I'm trying to say is that, even before we start trying to think about what a Frobenius monoid is semantically, if we just look at your syntactic, let's see, if we look at your syntactic descriptions of these props, we see that they're already feel like they have some relationship to sets or finite sets, right? I mean, correlations are a kind of morphism between finite sets.
Yep.
And so, yeah, the very naive thought that I'm trying to articulate here is that, maybe it's not going to be a coincidence that our concept of what a finite set over a commutative ring is going to be, maybe it's not a coincidence, not completely coincidence, that's leading us into thinking about some concept like Frobenius monoid, where the syntax involves finite sets. or something like that. It's a very naive, half-formed thought, but I wanted to say that out loud.
Yeah, it almost seems like it's wrong. I mean, I see what you mean. But
Did you say wrong or strong?
Yeah, wrong.
Wrong, right? Because it seemed backwards.
Right. Yeah.
Between syntax and semantics or something, right? But that doesn't mean that it's.
Yeah, no, it doesn't mean that it is really wrong. Just a sort of.
Yeah, I don't know yet, but it's suggestively wrong.
That is, we were
aiming.
We're like, for example, if you look at special Frobenius monoids over the complex numbers, so the category of those is the category of finite sets and functions op. So the maps,
very interesting.
So the maps between the special, so that's the way in which the special Frobenius, sorry, I will say separate, I should say separable algebras, because I'm just wanting to preserve the.
Yes.
So yeah, so sorry. So separable commutative algebras over, say, the complex numbers. A nice.
Yes.
Screen. That gives you the category of finite sets op. And then also like special Frobenius algebras gives you the category of finite sets and bijections. Maybe you can say op if you want, but it doesn't matter there. So there, the maps between the algebraic gadgets have a very set-like quality to them. Whereas here we are saying that the prop for the algebraic gadgets has a certain set-like quality to it. You probably understood this already. So it's sort of.
I was sort of hinting about this idea about relationships between allegories and toposes. You know, a topos is sort of like an axiomatic generalization of the category of sets and functions between them, whereas an allegory is correspondingly a sort of axiomatic generalization of the category of sets and sets and relations between them.
Right.
So yeah, right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, we are getting at stuff here that I want to try to say more about, and I may have I probably still have a few minutes left to say something here.
Sure.
So yeah, what am I trying to say here? So, well, so you and I are both hinting about all sorts of subtleties or variations over in this Frobenius algebra world. The extra little bells and whistles like special, extra. By the way, did I already ask you about this? You can't have something that's just extra without being special.
Yeah, you can.
You can.
You can.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You did. Okay, you did already write that. Okay. I'm still confused.
I could study just extra Frobenius, but I.
All right. I'll have
really thought about that.
Yeah, all these things I should learn and think about all these things, but I'm trying to I'm trying to somewhat avoid too much digression here. So let me get back on the track of what I'm trying to ask here, or what I'm trying to say here. So, and again, you're sort of hinting at different things about different versions of the category of sets that sort of have the same objects, but different kinds of morphisms, like bijections versus functions versus relations. And then there are even other possibilities in there. Like surjective relations or something like that. But see, I'm hoping this is in harmony with something that's going on over on my side of the story. My side of the story being, the doctrine side, the doctrinaire side. So, I talked about this concept of, I talked about this theory of a set of size n.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some interesting variations on that as well. And this is related to some things that we've sort of hinted at various points in some various past discussions. So you can also do, well, so yeah, so okay, so for, you know, to syntactically describe the to in some way describe the theory of a set of size n, as I just described it, as I just named it or called it or whatever, we said that you can get that theory by taking the representation category of the group n bang. Okay.
Can I stop sharing this thing? I want to see you write stuff.
I guess yes, but I haven't really gotten back to writing stuff yet. But you're right. It is a good time to do it. So yes. Okay. So let me try to turn my screen sharing back on. How do I do this? Why does it look different? Okay. Now it looks like it's back. Can you see it? No. Okay. You didn't quite. Okay. Now you can see it.
Yep.
Okay. But I'm going to cross this out because you had your own printed version so I didn't really need this here. So what am I trying to say here? So we have, yeah, we're gonna have to invent some terminology here for subtle differences, subtle contrasts that we have been kind of sweeping under the rug previously. So we've talked about the theory, and theory in this context just means that it's a total two-rig. The theory of a set of size n. And that is basically, the syntactic category is the representation category of n bang. And because we're working over, some commutative ring K0, it's actually the representations over that ring, but we don't really need that. I mean, we could work over just over the category of sets or something like that. But let me mention another theory here. Okay, there's also the theory. Well, this is another theory that could arguably deserve the same name, but that means that we need, to sharpen our terminology, put in more precise names to tell the difference between these different versions. So maybe I should say of a set of, I want to say sub-size n or something like that, or size sub n or something like that. I mean, what it's going to be the representations of the monoid n to the n. And
that seems right to me, just because of the more linear analogous thing I've studied. The theory of a vector space of dimension n and the theory of a space of
yes. Yeah, I thought I was the one who taught you about that. Maybe
you probably did, but I've been doing. But I've been. Yes. I was studying the category of. I was just learning stuff that people know about the category of representations of endomorphisms of a vector space.
Yeah, well, I'm right. I mean, I told you some stuff.
Yeah, you told me.
You told me that Alan Knudsen had also been telling you stuff about it, or something like that.
Yeah, and then I right. Yeah, and then I
invented your own version.
No, just people. I just tried to read what people had figured out about stuff.
Yes. So this is suggestively similar to that, but there could be all sorts of subtleties here. So I mean, this is already hinting at, I mean, yes, I think you've already just hinted at this yourself. This is hinting at the idea that this is relevant to the story of different ways that you can try to eliminate the dependence on n. Because, sets of size smaller than n appear as retracts of a set of size n.
Right.
So, that's one of the reasons we say a set of subsize. So, right. So in fact, so what am I trying to say here? That like, let's go back to your linear example for a moment. When you're talking about the models of the theory, where the theory is the representations of a matrix algebra, whole matrix algebra, instead of just a matrix group. And in that case, the representations of the matrix group, that gives you the theory of a vector bundle. Whereas the representations of the whole matrix algebra, that gives you the theory of of a sort of skyscraper bundle or something like that. I mean, it's going to generically be, this bundle is generically going to have fibers that are zero-dimensional, but it will have these little spikes that are higher dimensional. And it's like a skyscraper sheaf or something, a skyscraper bundle or something like that. Have you thought about that when you look at the models of this theory that you're talking about? Because that's kind of what happens.
I don't know why you say that they're generically the lowest dimension.
It's some kind of energy thing. It takes energy to.
Okay, well, I would have thought, I don't know what you mean by generic. Anyway, I would have thought that they'd be high dimensional on an open set and then like clumped down to a lower dimension on a.
I certainly guessed that at one point, but I think it doesn't work out that way. I think it actually ends up being, on an open set, they will be the lowest possible dimension and the highest dimension on this closed set. What?
That's crazy. Okay, I don't believe you, but okay, it doesn't matter that much right now. I mean, not right this second, it doesn't matter. But
yeah,
anyway.
it doesn't matter too much right this second, but right. I've certainly gotten confused about this before, so I could be making some horrible mistake. But I really think that that's what happens the last time I checked. Not only is that what I think happens, but I think it happens. It turns out to actually be a familiar thing that we actually already know from some examples, like where we have blow up of I don't know. I'll have to think about it, particularly since we're running out of time. Yeah, we're way running out of time right now. Yeah. So okay, let me just try to wrap it up here. Let me try to wrap it up, but hopefully in a way that actually will lead to continuation of this the next time that we talk. So what am I trying to say here? That, well, I've just introduced this analog, as you suggest, of that thing about the contrast between matrix algebra and, am I saying this right? I said matrix algebra versus matrix groups, but that wasn't the right way to say it. I should have said matrix group versus matrix monoid.
Yeah.
Representations of the matrix group versus representations of the matrix monoid. Now we have this sort of analog of this here, as you say, it's sort of like a nonlinear analog or something like that. And my vague idea at this point is that this is going to harmonize with things that you were telling me about different flavors of Frobenius structure, possibly extra versus special versus whatever. So let's just try to wrap it up there. But I mean, wrap it up there, but don't think that's not necessarily the exact. I'm not saying that this is the exact right thing to do, but I'm saying that we're going to try to follow up on this story. We're not sure exactly how it's going to go, but it might have to do with what I've just introduced here, or it might end up being something slightly different. But we'll see how it goes. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, there's
And,
tons of
even though this is kind of like in the middle, we're leaving in the middle of something here, but I'm hoping it's sort of okay. I'm hoping you have some sympathy for what I'm trying to do here, and you can see what I'm trying to do. We'll see how well it works out. Were you gonna say anything else before we could?
No, just that I'm still sort of busy, but anyway, I like this stuff a lot, and I could easily imagine diving in and trying to do
Sure.
lots of stuff. So
Sure. As I expected, I didn't get to the concrete stuff today about the art and reciprocity stuff, which is annoying because that really is an application of this very abstract stuff that we're talking about here. So that's another, there's so many things I want to talk about. We have very limited time, but I really do want to get to that as an application of this stuff. But we'll see how that goes.
yeah,
That also depends on how much success I have in working out the concrete calculations with the art and reciprocity. We'll see how that goes. Anything else?
no.
All right, so thanks a lot, and hopefully we'll continue. Okay, I'll see you.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.